Porsche's 911 reaches its 8th generation and in 992 series form is bigger, faster, more luxurious and a tad more efficient, just as you'd want. More importantly, it's still the most usable super sports car of its kind, yet somehow also still the most exciting, the most dialed-in 911 we've seen to date. Only Porsche knows how. Can its enhancements be delivered, though, without dilution of the magical experience that served this model line so well for so long? And which 911 will suit you best? Coupe or cabriolet? Rear or four-wheel drive? Business express or race refugee? Here's where we find out.
The twin-turbo 3-litre flat 6 may have a very different sound and feel to the bigger capacity units served up by rivals, but you still get a delightful howl from the boxer motor, and this time around significantly more power too, to compensate for a 55 kilo increase in weight. There's 385 PS in the base Carrera and 450 PS in the Carrera S, with rear-wheel drive or four-wheel drive options in each case. With so much low and mid-rev torque from this power plant, you can drive it as lazily as you like. Press harder though, and this Porsche's brilliant handling is matched by almost staggering speed. Pick the right combination of engine, gearbox and options, this Carrera 4S Coupe for example, and the car will rocket past 62 miles an hour from a standstill in just 3.4 seconds. Yet the same car is also significantly more efficient than obvious rivals, managing up to 27.2 mpg on the WLTP combined cycle and 206 grams per kilometre of NEDC rated CO2. It's really quite a combination. As before, there is a manual gearbox available, but most bars will want the PDK paddle shift automatic, which now offers 8 speeds. The optional Sport Chrono Pack gives you launch control and a Sport Response button, which preconditions the drivetrain for maximum acceleration over 20 seconds for really swift overtaking. Dynamic changes to this 992 series car include sharper steering, a wider front track width, and wheels, which are now unequally sized, bigger at the back, which are sized larger than before, with a mix of 20 and 21-inch rims on this S-Series version. PASM adaptive damping is standard, as are dynamic engine mounts and the PTV torque vectoring system. Plus, the usual selection of drive modes has been added to, with a wet mode, which senses excess road surface spray and can adapt the handling for slippery conditions. For extra cornering stability on the Carrera S models, you can add in the Porsche Dynamic Chassis Control Active Roll Compensation System and the Active Rear Axle Steering. Even in its standard form though, a 911 Carrera delivers a more driver-centric feel than its competitors. Right at the edge of adhesion, you feel a greater sense of confidence and control as part of an experience that's even more complete and even more satisfying this time around. It's easy to assume that the styling team for the 911 has the easiest job in the world. After all, essentially the same shape has been used ever since the car was originally launched back in 1963, and that continuity is a big part of its appeal. Actually, the 911 has changed hugely over the decades. This 992 series version is a huge 229mm longer than the 60s original, while also being 20mm longer and 45mm wider at the front than its 991 series predecessor. You'd know the classic silhouette at a glance, of course, but if you weren't a 911 brand loyalist, you might not necessarily notice the changes that designate this 8th generation model. For admirers of this car, though, they'll be uber significant. The door mirrors have been redesigned and aerodynamically enhanced to reduce wind noise. The lower section of the nose is more horizontally orientated. It emphasises the 46mm of extra front track width, which has sharpened up the handling, but there's now rather an expanse of black plastic across the larger intakes, which is arguably less elegant than before. The rear changes have been the most controversial ones. The biggest difference actually isn't this full-width lighting strip, which is becoming fashionable amongst the so-called experts to dislike. It actually lies in the fact that it's now not possible to have the old classic narrow rear bodywork on rear-driven Carrera models, which some of the cognoscenti think is rather a pity. Arguably more important than any of this is what now lies beneath the voluptuous panelwork. These days, apart from the front and rear aprons, the outer skin is entirely made of aluminium. This, as you can see, has entered the digital age. Just as it did in the very first 911, the dashboard now flows in an unbroken span across the entire width of the interior, and it now feels luxurious, contemporary and extremely stylish. Through the Grippy 3-spoke wheel, which is also new, lies a defiantly analogue central rev counter, without which a Porsche simply wouldn't be a Porsche. But the two 7-inch readouts that sit either side of it are actually configurable freeform displays. Just about everything else you need to know is covered off by this generously sized 10.9-inch flush-mounted Porsche communication management touchscreen display in the centre of the dash. This monitor is, of course, also multi-configurable. Now, the home screen here is based around personalisable tiles, which you can move about, rather like files on a desktop screen of a PC. Here, for example, we happen to have chosen to prioritise radio, drive modes, exhaust settings, weather and phone status. Now, we could go on and on about infotainment and connectivity here by talking about things like the new Track Precision and Road Trip Porsche apps, and the fact that this car is permanently online thanks to its integrated LTE-compatible SIM card, which makes possible features like Radio Plus, an online radio system that seamlessly cuts in if, when you're listening to a station, you leave the range for terrestrial FM or DAB reception. But we won't do any of that because there's lots else of even greater importance to brief you on. The seats, for example, which have been completely revamped with lightweight construction. They now place you 5mm closer to terra firma, and they're even more supportive with a wider base cushion and a backrest that's 20mm higher. Now, with most rival supersports cars, Audi's R8, Aston Martin's Vantage, the Mercedes-AMG GT and McLaren's 540C, for example, this is where we'd be finishing our tour of the cabin. But the 911 has its reputation as the most practical model in the class to uphold, hence the continued inclusion of the two small rear seats that you'd have to do without in the brand's 718 Cayman and Boxster models. Now, the mid-engine configuration of Porsche's 718 Boxster and Cayman models frees up space for a rear boot compartment, but of course, with this twin-turbo 3-litre 6 slung out the back here, you don't get that with a 911, just this little flap here that rises to reveal an engine plaque and access to various service reservoirs. That means that anything that you can't fit inside, therefore, has to go in this compartment beneath the sculpted bonnet. Now, this is now 132 litres in size, regardless of your chosen 911's rear-driven or four-wheel drive status. In summary, what we have here is a worthy evolution of the world's longest-running sports car dynasty. Porsche's banking on the fact that the excellence of this 911 will help to simplify the decision over whether to commit to the significant outlay involved in buying it. If over half a century of development has taught us anything, it's that you wouldn't bet against them succeeding in doing just that.